Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ask Dr. Be Good show, the show where we talk about the practice of pedagogy and the politics currently happening in public education. As always, I ask that you write your name in the comments when you come in and let me know your thoughts, your observations, questions about the topic being discussed. I'm a longtime teacher, so I enjoy having an actively participating class during the show. Even if you listen later, you can still pop in your questions because I'll get alerted and I'll answer you back. Now let's get started. Well, we are at the end of our school year. We didn't think we were going to make it, and now we're here almost. Some of the school districts will be out next week. Some will be in later June because some of you remember we started late. Many school districts got a late start, and they did virtual school, and now they're having to go push into the June, second, third week of June. So it depends on the district. Very odd way we started, and now we've got a staggered finish too. But I wanted to bring back our master teacher friend, Karla Smith, who has been out there, well, the last 2 years, because this is a 2-year really pandemic problem, and it's going to turn into a 3-year. But let me introduce Karla for those of you that don't know her. Karla Smith is a master teacher. She's considered that by her district and is part of the teacher incentive program that now has started in her district and then moved across the state. So welcome, Karla, to our show again, because you've been on several times to bring information from the field. So talk a little bit about your background, what do you teach, and then we'll go reflect a little bit about your year.
Hello, glad to be back. Yes, I teach in Dallas ISD. I teach 8th grade, and I am the instructional lead teacher for science at my middle school. We're primarily students of color, Title I, all of that interesting stuff that changes our dynamic in this COVID landscape even more. So I'm in my 3rd decade of teaching and love it, love it, love it. But this has been the hardest year by far that I've ever had. I don't think anyone would contest that statement.
And so let's talk about that. Let's talk, can you remember back to the beginning of this school year? It was the end of the semester of being at home virtually for the first time. We got through the summer. Again, some of us did virtual summer school. And then the school year started. Talk a little bit about your start, and if you can remember, what did you think it was going to be like versus how did it turn out?
I was one of the ones that did virtual summer school. I did 8th grade math and reading, and I kind of thought once we started in the fall that it was going to go a lot better than summer school because we were just building the plane as we were flying it. As we found out, it didn't drastically improve in the fall because we had kids with tech issues, whether they didn't have a device or they didn't have Wi-Fi or they just didn't feel like logging on or they didn't do the work or it just kept snowballing. And next thing you know, we're at semester and we've got blocks of kids we've never met. Things happening out of our control. We're calling, we're emailing, we're scrambling, and the year's almost half over and we still had so many kids that were not engaged. So once we got more kids engaged, now they're behind. So then you're trying to catch them up, but they were behind before from the year that we ended. So it's been really tough. Ironically, today our campus tested Science Star, and I proctored and tried not to look at the screens as I'm walking around. And all you could do is hope that you did them right. I have a rash on my hand from the stress, and I usually don't get stressed, but you fear that you didn't have enough time because the STAR wasn't later for us. This is about when we would normally take it, but we lost 5 weeks. We started a month later, then we had the week off for the snowstorm. 5 weeks in my room is like 5 months. And so it has been so difficult to reconcile the fact that what I'm doing isn't enough? What if they are still going to be behind? What if they fail? And I think for most teachers who really love what they do, that's the hardest part, is worrying that you're not going to be able to be as good virtually as you would be in a regular school year.
Did you have any assessment data prior to STAR that, checks for understandings that led you to think that you would know how your students would test?
Well, the problem is my data is great, but with STAR, you don't have the option of testing virtually. So we did MAPS testing, all those kids could take those from home. So all we have is who decided to show up, and most of the kids didn't show up. So you have a little smattering here and there. So the data we're going to get back is not an actual representation of who you've been teaching. And so a lot of the kids who would have aced it according to the data, all the checks for understanding, the common assessments, MAPS data, didn't choose to take the test. They didn't come in. So unfortunately, when we're doing all that data analysis, and I know, 20 years ago, I remember all the data, the meetings and stuff. So I'm a pro at data, but sadly, I'm not going to be nearly as invested in the data because it's just who showed up. And what's not good too is some of those kids showed up because the school's been calling saying, hey, your kid's going to have to be retained. We haven't even seen them. They haven't engaged. So they're hurrying up and getting here for STAR testing, though they haven't been in any classes. So those kids, yeah, probably are going to not do well because they haven't been engaged in the instruction. So it's just a weird year. I'm so glad that we aren't doing this again in the fall. The kids won't have that option. They will have to come, and that's going to be better. But
yeah. So a master teacher saying it was tough for her. Imagine if you were a first or second year teacher. Goodness gracious. What surprises did you have? What ahas, and what took you by surprise?
I would say how many kids didn't want to come, even though we got the parents on board and said, yeah, sure, I'll agree, I'll send them in. And then the kids said, we don't want to go, we'd rather stay home. But yet they didn't want to actually log on to Zoom. So it surprised me how much latitude that students were given when we had the school and the parents in agreement, but then kids just chose not to come because parents are at work or whatever, all the weird scenarios. It just seemed like there were so many things getting in our way. I felt like we were stuck in the muck. You'd call, but then the next week, yeah, I thought we were going to send them, but then we didn't. I just couldn't believe that we couldn't just figure this out, months and months in. We couldn't just get kids to click a link, come to class, do some assignments, because gosh, I'll tell you, the amount of time that has been invested in creating super interactive, authentic, engaging to the most that you could do, just presenting a presentation online. We did all that, and some kids just said, no, we're not doing that. And we had so many that I only saw ever 20% of my students in the building. And so it surprised me that I could teach a whole year and never meet my kids. The relationship, I always knew relationships were important, but it surprised me how big of a gap there would be in your teaching when there isn't the opportunity to have the relationship, because I can't go to your house and make you log into the Zoom. So I was shocked that even I, staying till 8 and 9 at night making calls, couldn't make it happen beyond that 20%, of kids coming to school. And probably on any given day, I had at least 30% of the kids absent from Zoom. So that surprised me that still in the second semester they could just click an attendance form and that would count as they were engaged by the district. If they went and clicked anything at all in Google Classroom, then we couldn't count them absent. So that surprised me that we didn't have any sense of accountability for attendance. They just had to log on to any platform and we were required to count them in attendance, whether they did an assignment or not.
Now you're teaching an SSI grade though, 8th grade, 5th and 8th grade are SSI, Student Success Initiative grades, which in a normal year pre-COVID, they got 3 attempts to pass the test. And if they did not pass the 3rd attempt, they would then be automatically retained unless the parent appealed it, which most did. And based on maybe how closely they were to passing it, or maybe the child was a known test bomber but had great grades. You know, there were all these other subjective things to look at before just retaining somebody, right? Because especially with the older kids, the data show that when you retain somebody, especially after early childhood grades, they have a very much higher chance of dropping out. And so here you have an SSI grade, and the headache that you all will have in the fall coming back with trying to do all those appeals, and gather the documentation for all of those kids who did not either show up for the test or failed the test, math and reading. We may be entering a more normal 3rd year, but that next year will be the 3rd year of COVID impact. It still will. I mean, have you all even started thinking about that?
Yeah, I'm already signed up to teach math in summer school. For science, they've never given us a chance to take it even twice, which, you know, I have a bone to pick with that because we have the highest passing standard in science. We have the highest passing standard. We've got 3 years of TEKS. When you go to the TEA website, it literally tells you it's a 3rd 6th, a 3rd 7th, a 3rd 8th. So you've got 3 years of TEKS, which the math and reading, they're tested every year. So they've just got to move those kids from one year to the next. So we have to get kids ready to test over a 3-year span. They haven't been tested since 5th grade. You have 1 shot to do it, and you've got the highest minimum score to be considered a pass. And therein lies the problem. For me, that's where the adrenaline goes. That's where I do my best work. It's like the Seabiscuit Hail Mary pass. I love it because I think about, well, if I don't do it, then they don't get to go. Like, they won't get to be in that pre-AP class. They won't get to do the STEM fields that they maybe could pursue. So I love that. I don't love it when I don't even get a stab at it. If I don't get to meet you, if you won't log on, if you won't engage, if you're constantly having to watch, let's say, younger sisters and brothers and babysit, or I've had kids have jobs. They literally messaged me and said, I'm working Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'll only be in class Tuesday, Thursday. Okay, so with those circumstances, I felt like, well, I can't feel guilty for what I didn't get done because I didn't have a fair shot, but I still, like I said, have that rash because the way it sits with me is this will be the year that I failed kids. That's how it feels, is I failed kids. You know, I'm in my mind now, but the way it feels is I'm here to save kids, not to watch them, you know, go to a test and it's a bloodbath. So that's the tough part for teachers is
Sure.
Not all of us are saying, oh, we hate this and we're leaving the profession. Some of us realize how much we were needed all along. It really shows that. And we're more motivated than ever, but we can't do what we can't do. I mean, I can't do more than just do the best I can on screen. But if you don't show up or you're working 3 days a week, I'm stuck. And so it's going to take me years, I feel like, to get over the trauma that I feel for what this year has done to your own sense of confidence. It's like, I'm the one who's supposed to be always able to get it done. So I think a lot of teachers don't even realize how big of a toll it is. It's been really, really mind-boggling to try and figure out how to wiggle our way out of this situation. And as you said, what about all the kids who haven't even shown up once or twice to Zoom, and the district wants us to pass them? No, there's a hard no there. For me, because not every kid had a circumstance where they couldn't log on. The parents might have said, I thought they were logging on. We were at work. They should have been logging on. We have great Wi-Fi. And those are the situations where you think, no, you shouldn't just get to take a bye and go to the next grade, because some kids have worked the system. I'm not saying there aren't situations, but some kids literally, admittedly, will say, I was at home playing video games all day. My mom and dad thought I was in class.
Working, yeah.
Yeah.
So what COVID blessings, because there have been blessings, we know there are. So let's always think, come back to the COVID blessings in this case.
Well, for one, the technology, both in terms of the hardware we've received that we didn't have before. I've got a big, I call it my Jumbotron. I've got a giant, 75-inch TV that does all the little bells and whistles. Well, I would have loved that years ago, but I have it now, so that's good. That doesn't go away. And then the tech that we've been forced to learn to do, all of a sudden it was boots on the ground. You're in the trench, rapid fire. Oh my gosh, those PowerPoints weren't interactive. We used to just click through the slides. Now we have to have it where the kids are dropping and dragging and clicking. And that is a blessing, because that is forever going to raise the bar for us as teachers. Is I don't have to teach and then wait till the DOL at the end, or the few little checks for understanding every 7 or 8 minutes with the little whiteboard. I can see on the fly all kids, like on a Nearpod. I can see the whole time. So that's been a blessing for myself and my students, is I'm so much more checked in. And I can be dynamic. I don't have to keep talking for 5 minutes to see if I fell on my face as a teacher. I can see right now, nope, they're not doing it. When I've got that panel on the, let's say, the Nearpod or other platforms. So to me, that's probably been the biggest tech piece. But other blessings would be the things I used to complain about, or even in my mind. I'm not a big complainer in terms of spreading negativity, just because it'll drag your day down. But we all have thoughts like, oh, we've got to do this, or things you get tired of. I miss, like, aggressive monitoring laps. It's like, oh, the band break model. Oh, when I used to have to walk around and do the laps, what I wouldn't give to walk around my kids and look and see that they wrote something on a piece of paper, or the projects I had to grade where they'd do poster projects and you're, there till 10 at night. Oh, please let me see a picture a kid drew that wasn't just insert a picture that was a Google image, like a creative thought that a kid generated on paper and something they wrote. I now will never, ever complain again about grading all the papers, because that was who the students were. It wasn't that they Googled it and copied and pasted and imported this file. You knew what they knew because they were sitting in front of you when they did it. I miss that. And I used to kind of, think, oh, now I've got to grade this. Now I can't wait. Now I can't wait to have to grade paper again.
What practices, what instructional practices do you absolutely have to learn new, and that for COVID, because of COVID, that you will now carry with you in your instructional tool belt from now on?
Oh, definitely all the platforms. I mean, there's just so many of them, too many to list, but the idea that at any given moment through the entire lesson, kids have got to be engaged, and I will get a report right in the moment to see who's doing what, who hasn't answered, who's, for example, quizzes is just one where I can see right now what every kid knows, what they don't know, and I can write the prescription before it's the 6 weeks test, or before it's even the end of the week test, or even at the end of the class, the DOL. I can know at any second, anytime I want, what every single kid in my room knows and doesn't know, and they can be interactive. They'll always get to keep the devices that the district has already said. They're going to be in here. They're going to be able to take notes and interactive notebooks. That's great to some degree, but we need to get back to paper and pencil. I mentioned that in one of the other sessions that we did, that when I started forcing kids to write things down, the math portion specifically in the physics and chemistry, and then they showed it on the screen, all of a sudden they clicked. Just typing in numbers is not the same when you're doing math calculations as when you're doing the old-fashioned paper pencil. So things that we've learned that tech does are great, but things we've learned that tech can't do. There are gaps that tech actually is not beneficial, where we need paper and pencil. So we can't completely throw out paper and pencil, because for a while our EDs were saying we're never going to have kids take notes in a notebook again. So some of this data I have presented and said, no, I need you to, reconsider that, because look at the data before and after. And then they said, okay, well, maybe that's some new research that there are certain components that the old-fashioned way fits better. So we've kind of learned a lot, for good and bad, in terms of what tech can and can't do.
Okay. Now, during all of this, not only were you being asked to learn how to teach at home and face-to-face, and these new platforms, and please stay sane while you're doing it, right? So what mindfulness practices, what stress relieving practices did you have to put into place to help you with that?
That would also fall in line with the COVID blessings as well. Is my doctor finally said, what's up with you? Why do you have high blood pressure? You've never had high blood pressure, never had anything on that puts you on the radar, but now we're gonna have to put you on blood pressure medication. So it wasn't all great, coming up and doing all those extra hours, and you're feeling like you're doing the right thing, but my doctor disagreed. So he put me on a certain diet and exercise, and so now I've lost 25 pounds, and he assures me that it's nowhere near where I still need to go. But I do, which is fine. So, but the point is, I do listen to my doctor. So I do feel a lot better. So I feel like it has forced me to actually not just be a workaholic. I have to take my health into consideration. So things I thought I could never do, like giving up sugary beverages, all the grains, the pastas. I have no grains at all. I'm not allowed to have it. I'm not allowed to have grains of any kind. Can't have sugar. So that has been a blessing, though I would never have volunteered to get rid of sugary beverages just for one. That's how I got through the day.
Well, so how do you get through the day now without them?
Well, of course, you already know the answer to this, is when you don't have the crash every time after. Yeah, so you're not going up and down. And yeah, so that's definitely been a blessing. But in addition to just losing the weight, eating better, sleeping better, exercising, you just feel better, and you can take that stress. Now, I still have to take the blood pressure medication until I get to my goal. That's how I know I'm not there yet. But I wouldn't have started had it not been for this situation. It was just a ticking time bomb, not taking care of myself and always working too much. So the takeaway is, if you don't take care of you, the oxygen mask thing, then you can't take care of the kids. They've noticed, and I said, well, I wasn't doing it the right way. And when you find out you weren't doing it the best way or the right way, then you just switch. And that's what I'm doing. And I used it as an example for the kids, because they'll say, I don't like doing whatever it is that we're asking them to do. They don't like Google Slides, let's say. Well, I don't like not drinking Cokes, for example. But yet I have now adapted. And so, just to let them know, yes, it's hard, and no, you don't want to do it according to what other people are telling you is best for you, but yet that doesn't mean it isn't. And
so you should really pat yourself on the back, because similar to what did they call it? The freshman 10 or something, where freshmen in college always gain 10 pounds, or most people during COVID have gained weight. So the fact that you've actually taken off that much weight, that is a huge, really achievement. So good for you. Now, I know that even though we were in COVID, you were still part of some teacher groups, some, and you know, your teacher groups would get together and do leadership activities. I mean, how were they doing? These were high achieving teachers that you were meeting with on a regular basis. What pattern and trend did you see from them that you know, due to COVID? Because this is more than just about Karla. It's about what are other teachers out there in the field? What did you see?
Yeah, one of those groups is Teach Plus, that I was a policy fellow, and then moving forward, I'm actually now one of 9 teachers that are senior policy fellows. So we are on the forefront of basically influencing educational policy. We, you know, meet with people like Mike Morath and several legislators. But in those groups, as you were saying, these are high achieving teachers. These are people who all have a TEA designation. And some of them weren't doing that well. Some of them came deflated to meetings, and we relied on each other to bolster, you know, each other's confidence. It's sometimes really hard to be that straight A student all through school and then the top tier teacher, and you're always used to being successful. Okay, I put myself in that group. I was the valedictorian. I was summa cum laude. I don't know what it means to be not successful on a regular daily basis. But this year, it's like, wow, on a daily basis, I had 20% of the kids who would rather play video games than come to my class. That's hard on your psyche, you know, day in and day out. So we had to glean together and say, okay, well, maybe if we made things more interesting or more interactive, or what is it we need to do? And then at some point you have to say, okay, you don't get to keep beating yourself up and getting the high blood pressure and gaining weight because of the stress and the cortisol. Sometimes you have to say, okay, you're going to do the absolute best you can. No doubt. You're going to completely leave it all on the field, as they say. And then you're going to go to bed, and you're going to go home and be with your family. You're going to go to bed, and you're going to realize that you did the best you could. And that has to be enough. You can't keep beating yourself up and, you know, having to take Rolaids for a while. I was having to do that because I was just having stomach issues just from the stress of it. So once you do all of those platforms and do all the technology and take the trainings and do everything you can to make sure that you are serving kids to the best of your ability, then you kind of have to let some of it go in it. And it's really hard for some people to do, but that, I would say, the top performing teachers did the best they could, but they didn't make it where they couldn't sleep at night and then showed up completely depleted and not able to serve the kids who were coming. At some point, you have to preserve your energy for when you are on stage, as we say, you know.
You have to prioritize your energy, right? And so what I'm hearing you say is, and you were among high flyers, you saw those high flyers having to sort of meet the own challenge of failing forward, right? Learning some new self-management skills. And so did most of them do that pretty well?
Yeah, we spent a lot of our time talking about growth mindset. I mean, I love Carol Dweck and growth mindset, but when you're actually stuck for a year plus, I mean, it's one thing to have a bad day, a bad week, but when you're having a bad 2 years, the growth mindset thing gets a little, you know, like, yeah, okay, you know, yeah, we're failing forward. You know, you kind of get sick of hearing, well, you know, it's a growth opportunity. Okay, well, you know, I'm tired of this growth. And so the idea of how to get unstuck over and over and over again is a life skill, of course. And then, of course, we had things happening in our personal lives. We've had our own family members getting sick. We've had deaths in the family. So then all of that just piles on you and piles on you. And you have to figure out, okay, well, this problem is almost over. but what will the next one be? And will this have given us gleanings and lessons that we can apply there? And I would say, yes, you learn to prioritize. I've learned to cut the fat, not only in my diet, but cut the fat in terms of where am I spending my time that I need to stop wasting time? Where do I need to keep the focus and realize what was working that you ignored because you took it for granted, like family time or being at your house. You were stuck at home for months and months, and then you realize, wow, we can embrace this. We can, create a space by being at home that isn't boring. When you have teenagers, I have twins that are teenagers at 16 that, they were claiming they were bored. Well, how can you make your own kids not be bored? Just so many different life skills that this last 2 years has taught us. I think we can take all that and apply it moving forward, regardless of a virus. It's just living better and prioritizing, as you said.
Right. And so my last question to you is how, on top of everything you talked about, you still had to be an at-home parent with, in this case, twins, who, you had to be the at-home teacher for your kids, for your students. I mean, how did that end up? What did you learn about your kids, teaching them at home, and yourself teaching your kids at home?
Well, I think of myself as a really great teacher. My kids, however, don't want me to teach them. I have great chemistry lessons, and one of my twins wasn't doing well in chemistry, and I just couldn't take it. So I sat her down next to me, and she hated it the whole time because kids don't want their parents to teach them things. I don't know what it is. And I thought, I was coming up with these great lessons. So I ended up having to switch their schools because they weren't able to go face to face at the high school that they were at because of the rules about drop off and pick up times and stuff. So they had to go to my local high school where they could take the bus and take the bus back because they had rules. You had to be on campus no more than 15 minutes before and after school, which I can't do. I'm a teacher. I'd have to drive there. So I had to switch them schools because they weren't being successful virtually. I mean, you have tag students who are barely passing classes, and I'm having to switch them from AP classes to regular classes. And you're thinking, what is going on here? Maybe I need to tutor you. Maybe I need to. No, they just needed to get back to school and be sitting in a room with a human being and not these canned videos that they were learning from. Some of that stuff, let me tell you, we tried that. Their district had all of their classes by pre-recorded videos of people who were not their teacher. And my kids would be crying and I'd say, what is going on? And she goes, I don't even know what she just said. And I can't ask a video a question. And I don't even know who this lady is who recorded the video. But I got to remember for the Friday Zoom to ask my real teacher. I'm not going to remember by Friday where I got lost 4 days ago. So that we've definitely learned doesn't work. And sadly, yeah, my kids were the guinea pigs for the all virtual, going like the flipped classroom kind of stuff, learned by video all week and then come on Friday. It didn't work for my kids at all.
So are they doing better? Did they sort of get back to the old high standards again?
Yeah, they immediately changed. One, when they were in the classroom with the teacher, and two, when they had other students there, so that you can have a discussion about a math problem or a chemistry problem instead of just watching a video in silence in the small little room every day, and you don't have any collaboration. You don't have anybody to bounce ideas off of, or wait, what does this mean when you put the coefficient, when you're just watching a video and then you have to do an assignment and you didn't have the chance to work in a group or interact. It just fell flat, and they're like, I don't know, I'm putting the answers, but it just doesn't feel the same. So there was definitely the social aspect of learning that was missing for them. They needed to work with their peers.
Well, and I think it's interesting talking to you, sort of a master level teacher you've got kids in the talented and gifted program, and yet it wasn't smooth sailing. It was tough. There were challenges, and in some cases, the challenges led to having to change schools, and those are huge implications that arose from this past year, and it's mind-boggling. But it's good to know that things are supposedly going back to normal, whatever the new normal is. It'll never go back to normal because we've all grown. We have, and I mean that in a positive way. We have grown a lot within the last. It's only been a year and 2 months. I know that it's 2 school years that have impacted, but it's really only been 14 months. So, but I thank you for coming on and sharing with us a little bit from the field. I always like to have parents and educators hear from people like you, because you're still there. You're in it, and you're doing everything you can to win it. and even for somebody like you, it was a struggle, and that's really helps people understand how difficult a year this was. So I thank you for coming on and joining us.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Yep. All right. Well, speaking of COVID, we have some interesting COVID news that I'm going to transition over to, because I guess the numbers talk to me. I'm a numbers and data person, but we have, and these are, I get summaries from newspaper articles from all over the country. And so I get the snapshots, which is always nice to have somebody else do the summaries for me, right? And if you keep hearing any funny dog noises, these are dog noises, it's always a challenge whether to have her in or out. If I have her in, sometimes she's good. If I have her out, sometimes she barks. So pardon me. All right, COVID-19 deaths. The deaths in the U.S. have hit the lowest level in 10 months. That's the good news. But it's still about 600 a day that still are dying every day. But and I know this sounds like a lot, but it's confirmed infections, meanwhile, have fallen to about 38,000 on average, their lowest mark since mid-September. So there you go. It's amazing how what can sound like a lot in a perspective of last September is really not a lot. So it has gone down 85% from 250,000 cases per day in early January. That's mind-boggling, folks. But it speaks to just so many celebrations that we have as far as all the COVID protocols, the vaccines, and so forth, right? It just really the data are showing the outcomes of what happens when you wear masks, socially distance, and then now, quickly approve a vaccine and then actually give the vaccine out as quickly as possible. So, yay. Now, I found this one particularly interesting, that the Yankees, the New York Yankees, have had coronaviruses, an issue on their team. They've had 7 people on their team, or staff members in the club, get COVID, and all 7 of them already were vaccinated, and all were asymptomatic except 1. So that reminds us that the vaccine is good, but there still seems to be some anomalies, and that certainly is an anomaly. Wow, 7 people in one group who already had the vaccine and are still getting COVID and evidently passing COVID, right? Somebody in that group passed it to the others. And then here's one that caught my eye, speaking of dogs. Blood analysis shows cats contract COVID-19 at a higher rate than dogs. Oh. Now, we've been hearing some things over the last year about animals can catch COVID in a family that has gotten COVID, but here we have numbers. So COVID-19 seroprevalence, or the prevalence of the SARS-CoV-2 antibodies in blood, is higher in cats than in dogs, and higher in general in pets living with people who have the disease. That makes sense, right? According to a study yesterday in the Emerging Infectious Diseases Italian scientists analyzed 198 serum samples, 130 from dogs and 68 from cats, collected March through June of last year, 2020. So March through June of the first part of the pandemic. And they also had 100 samples that they had collected, 65 from dogs and 35 from cats, that they had collected before the pandemic in 2019. And they were able to use that as a control. So very interesting. You can still pass your COVID on to your animals. So you don't hear much of it, but it's still out there. All right, and so continuing on with what's happening in our COVID world in the US, let's talk about what's happening in California. So Governor Newsom is calling for an increase in funding for school and community mental health programs as students return to face-to-face in-person learning, followed by a year marked by isolation and anxiety. And I've talked many times about the fact that especially our middle schoolers have been particularly impacted by the isolation. They are at the beginning of their hormonal trip to adulthood, and the need for them to be social and to be and become social is part of their personal development, and that was not happening. And so that many of our secondary kids starting in middle school have been suicidal, had suicide ideation. I believe 31% more kids went to the ER for mental issues during the pandemic year, the first part. So that's known research now. So a bid to return to in-person learning is more appealing to parents and teachers now that Detroit has redone their ventilation system. So that's interesting. So because I don't know if you remember, Detroit has been particularly hard hit with COVID. They have, unfortunately, our families in poverty, minority families, tended to get COVID at a higher rate. Some of that thought is because there tended to be more density in the homes, more people living together in the homes. And so it's interesting that that state's cure or treatment to make people feel safe again is redoing the school ventilation systems. I wonder what that costs. So that's sort of an interesting, and that's why I like to read what's happening in other states, because we've had one issue and many different approaches, right? And so it's interesting to hear how different states approached the same issue, the same COVID issue we had. And from COVID and mask wearing, we have big mask news now. In Texas, for example, this week, the governor announced that starting June 4th, government buildings, government offices, including public education districts, would not wear, starting at midnight, I guess it's until June 4th, 11:59 p.m. They, after that, he is rescinding the mandate to wear masks. It can be a personal choice, but as far as he is concerned, school districts, government offices cannot require people to wear masks. So let's see what's happening in other states around that, because that caused a lot of hoopla for several reasons. One is, for many people, school is not over until the second or third week of June, because many school districts started late. They didn't start in August. They started in September. They had to get their virtual environments set up, and parents weren't ready to send, and all of that. And so we're having to go later into June than we normally would. And that's another change. We really didn't need to have sort of more drama in the last couple weeks of school, but now we do. And we're having to scramble a little bit to let parents know and let teachers know, staff members know that we although we can't require masks, that we still encourage, not only if people want to wear masks, they may, but also they must follow the other protocols of hand washing, sanitizing. We will continue to be misting the classrooms like we have been, because it's the right thing to do. I don't know if we'll ever stop doing that. We know that it seems that cold and flu numbers are down. Kids aren't as sick with those. And we're hoping a lot of that has to do with not only increased safety protocols in the home, but certainly the cleaning of the buildings that are at a much deeper level now than they were before. So let's see what's happening in other states. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster banned all school and local governments from issuing a mask mandate. Elsewhere, most of, let's see. Oh, before I leave South Carolina, his order also bans the use of so-called vaccine passports. Under the 15-page executive order, parents, not public school officials or school districts, can decide whether students wear masks in class. So it's a parent's decision, and no passport, a vaccine passport, which is interesting. That's the first time I'd read that. And let's see. Also, Governor Henry McMaster said that schools and local governments need to work to understand how the rules affect them, and the announcement has also earned a sharp rebuke from the state's chief of public schools. And that caught my eye, because in Texas, really our chief of public schools is our Secretary of Education. And the Secretary of Education is put there by the governor. So in Texas, you wouldn't have our chief of public education rebuking the governor, because that's his boss. So interesting how different states operate. Ohio is set to lift most of its coronavirus restrictions in less than a month. Republican Governor Mike DeWine announced new guidelines Wednesday, saying that the mask mandate and remaining coronavirus health orders will be lifted on June 2nd. Social distancing and capacity restrictions will no longer be required, although schools and businesses will have the ability to put their own rules in place. Okay, well, that's interesting. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan announced a news conference Wednesday that loosened the coronavirus restrictions. Republican governor even said it might be feasible to ditch masks across the state soon if Marylanders continue to get vaccinated. There simply is no excuse for putting off your vaccine any longer. Again, California Governor Newsom said that California could significantly ease its mask mandates in the coming weeks as the COVID numbers decline. And so even California, which, that was one of the tightest states as far as COVID restrictions is concerned, even he's saying that could come soon. Starting this week, fully vaccinated Hawaiian residents can skip COVID-19 testing and quarantine requirements when flying between the islands. According to the new rules, which Governor David Ig announced last month, Hawaiian residents who were vaccinated in the states are exempt from testing and quarantine on the 15th day after their final shot. Okay. And from ABC News, even as the number of U.S. schools remain closed to minimize infections, districts and states from Alabama to Wyoming are deciding to ditch student mask mandates. Many more are likely to do the same before the next school year starts, despite the Centers for Disease Control's guidance that schools should prioritize universal and correct use of masks and physical distancing. Some public health officials are alarmed. From CNN, these long-awaited milestones could return, and that is Americans could see milestones like a full return to in-person classrooms now that COVID-19 vaccinations are open to young teens. I think we should be 5 days a week, everybody present in school, said CDC Director Rochelle Walensky. I think that we will be in a place in this pandemic where we'll be able to do that soon, and we all need to be in school learning. And a survey says that 57% of parents believe, no, sorry, 57% of US adults believe that proof of a COVID-19 vaccination should be required to attend sporting events in the latest Axios Ipsos survey. Coincidentally, 58% of American adults have received at least one shot, which President Biden hopes to increase to 70% by July 4th. The fully vaccinated Anthony Fauci told CNN he would not hesitate to go to an outdoor baseball game. My risk would be extremely low, particularly if I wear a mask. Now, I don't understand why he said that, because it's my understanding that when we wear a mask because it protects others from us, right? From our germs. So if he's the only one wearing a mask and nobody else is wearing a mask, and some people have COVID, then he could still get COVID, I thought, right? So those are those head scratchers that we still haven't fully come to terms with. And so, you know, stay tuned as we work our way around the common sense maze that COVID has created for all of us. That I was talking on another show that we all know about fuzzy math, right? Well, we have fuzzy science now that we've had since COVID began, and that to me, that's another example of fuzzy science. If the mask is to protect others. So again, we have come to that place where we need to wrap things up. But my hope is, as you all end your school years, and we'll talk more about having a more successful reflection around the end of the school year and going into summer, and should we send our kids to summer school, all that is coming. But try to stay healthy around all this, practice mindfulness. This is still May's Mental Health Month, and as we talk to people like our master teacher, Karla Smith, and hear that, you know, how she and other overachieving teachers met challenges that they frankly weren't used to having to tackle because they're so used to success, and they've had to, that you're not alone in this time of possibly questioning yourself, being a little bit paranoid about being around others. All of that is what we've all had to contend with. Would vaccines help? Many of us have felt much, much better after getting the vaccine. I got the vaccine a couple of months ago, and I still practice social distancing and wearing a mask and washing my hands and using sanitizer. So that works for me. I hope that you all have come to practices that work for you and your family, because frankly, that's what it's all about, is keeping your family safe, keeping your family learning, and making sure that others around you have those same intentions. All right, everyone, don't forget that we're in our legislative sessions around the country. If you've not reached out to your legislators, if you're not familiar with what's going on in public education during those legislative sessions, there's still time to make a difference. So find out who your legislators are and go make a difference. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.